This is Katrin with Disability Rights New York. Welcome to our podcast, Empire State of Rights Closed Captioned. We are here to bring you information on the most relevant topics regarding disability rights and advocacy. Today, we welcome Ryan Williams, DRNY staff attorney, and we will be talking to him about employment discrimination. Ryan, thank you for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be joining you.
So, Ryan, many people change jobs, come into the workforce, leave the workforce for a little bit of time, or they're staying in a job they've had for a long time. And our audience may have questions about employment discrimination and what steps they should take if they feel like they may have been discriminated against by their employer or their potential employer because of their disability. Can you talk to us about what those steps are and what should they do first?
Employment discrimination is a little bit of a broad kind of general concept, and it fits into the idea in 3 stages. Generally, it's you were denied a job during the hiring process because of your disability. You were denied a reasonable accommodation during the what's called interactive process. Or the classic definition that usually everyone knows is you're being harassed or intimidated by your fellow employees or your supervisors and employer because of your disability. If those situations are happening to you, generally that should be a red flag that you might be discriminated against on the basis of your disability. Because of that, there are certain methods in the legal world that we participate in at DRNY that you have to go through in order to make a stink about the situation and to go about it in the appropriate way. And the first step is going to an agency or the available agencies that are in New York State to say, hey, I think I've been discriminated against. You should probably investigate. And here's all the information. And that's usually the first step of what somebody should do if they want to go about disability discrimination.
And Ryan, I'm going to interrupt you here for a minute to ask you about disclosure. So if someone says in your interview, can they ask you about a disability or if you have a disability, and should you disclose, or is that your option?
Disability disclosure for employment in of itself is a giant topic. We could probably have another podcast dedicated to it. To try and talk about it in the shortest manner possible, you do not have to disclose your disability if you do not want to. An employer has to keep information as confidential as possible due to HIPAA regulations because they will be receiving medical information. Generally, and how this plays out, if you need an accommodation for the hiring process, generally you have to disclose. If you happen to be an individual who is blind, and the employer only gives you and allows you the opportunity to fill out an application on a hard copy, paper, pen and paper, old-fashioned. It's not in Braille text. You have to dictate it to you or write it out for you. Or if it's at like a kiosk in the store on a computer and there's no audio instruction, you got to disclose your disability. Generally afterwards is with reasonable accommodations. And again, that's a topic in of itself, but that's the other section is pre-employment and post-employment.
Great, thanks. I just thought that might be a question that our audience might be thinking about as we started this. So let's get back to what they should be doing first if they feel like there has been some discrimination.
Now, there are some tips and tricks that I would generally advise people doing if they're noticing a situation of discrimination, harassment. And it's probably what we all learned in our primary school when doing observations or doing like journalistic writing essays in English class, the who, where, when, and how. If you can arm yourself with that knowledge of if you're going to be relaying this information to somebody, to an agency or to an attorney, it's very good to have the who, where, when, and how written down in a journal or some other place where you can store that information. A lot of people might think, oh, this is because we can use that as evidence. Not necessarily, but it's helpful for you to recall events. And it makes it a lot easier to say it was on this date that this happened. Somebody said who, this is how they did it to me. And it makes everyone's world a million times easier when recalling events. That's usually the first tip that I give to people if they're going into a situation before, they call an advocate or an attorney for help with this. The other tip that I would say is if there are communications or emails, anything to you directly, save them. Save any information that you have possible, papers that you have, disciplinary records, anything that affects your job. If you could save it and put it in a pocket, if I say, keep your rainy day folder, put it in your rainy day folder. Anything that is tangible is very good.
So that's good information to know. So it's great to keep any information that you have or anything that maybe supports you in your complaint or even questions about having a complaint. But is it necessary? Are these documents necessary, or can you verbalize them to someone in the complaint and maybe write it down in a different form while filing a complaint?
They're not necessary. It's all designed to help you out in the long run in the process, but it is not necessary because the standards for the investigative process with the respective agencies that are in New York State are lower than what people normally think. This isn't a criminal trial or a civil trial where it's a very high standard. The investigative process is very sleuthing around and asking information, following up and checking up on people. So any and all information, even if it's just out of your memory, is perfectly fine.
Great. So if you're getting ready to file a complaint or find out if you can file a complaint, where you live really determines on where and how that's going to happen. Is that correct?
It does. One of the major differences is if you are a resident within New York City, classic definition of living in one of the boroughs, you can go to the New York City Commission on Human Rights. Now, the City Commission on Human Rights in New York State, and in comparison to the other two agencies, there's three in total, has I would say, the friendliest rules for the complaining party. They're very relaxed and helpful for anyone who has a complaint of discrimination.
So maybe they're the most user-friendly. Is that what we're getting from this?
Yes, the user-friendly.
And let's talk about the other two agencies. You said there are three. So let's say all three of them. Let's give their names and a little bit of a description of each one.
So to repeat again, for the residents of New York City, you can actually use all three. The New York City Commission on Human Rights, which we talked about. You can go to the New York State Division of Human Rights, which is statewide. Anyone throughout New York State can use them. And then there's the federal agency, the United States Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. So the New York City Commission is NYCCHR. The New York State is NYSDHR for the Division of Human Rights. And as we classically call the Equal Opportunity Employment Commission, it's the EEOC.
Great. And we will put a description and links to those three agencies below. Now, if members of our audience are having difficulty determining where to file or which agency to use, who can they contact for help?
You can either contact the agencies directly. They will say whether or not they can take your claim or look into it. Also, with the follow-up is with us. You can always give Disability Rights New York a call. We would be able to assess the situation and what's going on, ask you more pertinent questions designed specifically for your circumstances to determine if there's a better agency to disclose and to ask to investigate your claim of employment discrimination.
And briefly, can you let our audience know what's the timeline on these things? Say you have a feeling that you're being discriminated against, you want to file a complaint, you get to the right agency and you file a complaint. Is this a quick turnaround? Are they going to hear an answer in a week or two? Or is this something that maybe might take a little bit longer?
This is certainly a long haul process because this is the first step in what you would assume is, I'm gung ho and ready to go to court. Not quite yet. And even this process could take a year, about a little over a year. What generally happens is you file a complaint. it gets processed. People get in touch with each other. The agency may ask for more documentation. They may ask for medical records to prove disability status, which is a requirement under law. And, they have to follow up. They have to do their investigative process. They might try to mediate. They may do settlement negotiations. They could do a hearing in the agency. There's a written opinion that's settled. There's a review process. And even through all that, you haven't even begun to ask the question if you can bring your claim in state or federal court. So we're not even at the court process, which is even longer. So it can take a long, long, long time, depending on the long haul. Or if you go with this agency process, it could take about a year.
And it sounds like no two people are going to have the same experience. Ryan, this is such a big topic, and we've only talked about some of it here today. Is there anything else that you want our audience to know before we sign off?
I would say that if you have any questions or concerns about whether you are being discriminated against in your job, if you need help with reasonable accommodations, or if you had trouble with getting a job in the hiring process, always give us a call. We're available. We're here to help. We're always willing to help out anyone with these questions, and especially with their return to work.
Ryan, thank you so much for your time today. It's always a pleasure talking with you.
Thanks, and same to you as well.
Empire State of Rights Closed Captioned has been brought to you by Disability Rights New York, your source for disability rights and advocacy. If you enjoyed our program, make sure to subscribe, like, and share this post. If there is a subject you would like us to discuss, please email podcast@drny.org or comment below. Tune in next Wednesday, where we'll bring you more information on disability rights in the state of New York. The closed captioned and ASL version of this podcast is available on our YouTube channel. To listen to more Empire State of Rights closed captioned, follow us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.